Now it's time to continue our conversation with her Republican and conservative rival. Joining us once again is Nick LaLota. All right, let's get to some questions here. It's a major issue for just about everybody, maybe the number one issue for voters, talking about the economy. How do we turn it around in your eyes?
On the first day in Congress, Doug, I would aim to be part of a majority in Congress that would put a bill on the president's desk that stands for American energy independence. We're too reliant upon foreign nations to give us our energy. Just today, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries cut their production of their oil by 2 billion barrels. We're sitting on 43.8 billion barrels here in the U.S. The federal government should make it easier to extract that oil from our ground. We should do it safely. They're doing it overseas and they're not doing it safely for our environment. We can do it. We can do it here safely. I would be part of a team that would put a bill on the president's desk that would stand for the premise of extracting more of that oil, doing it safely, doing it on federal land, expediting permits so that we can help bring down the price of both fuel and everything else that is tied to it. That's the number one thing the federal government can do to help address this inflation issue.
Well, Democrats will blame most of the economic woes, if not all of it, on the pandemic. Are they right or wrong on that?
No, they're wrong. I mean, there's a few different components that go into the inflation issue. I think the energy thing is the biggest one. I do think that government overspending is also a big one, too. For 20 years, this has been a bipartisan problem. Neither party, when they were in control of the House, has balanced the budget in 20 years. I hope to be part of a new, fresh set of faces and ideas in Washington that can help balance the budget. The Democrat solution is spend more and more and more. Their so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which creates $485 billion in new spending and hires 87,000 new IRS agents. By the way, fully supported by my opponent, on record on her social media. I, of course, oppose that. I think less government spending, Doug, not more, is the answer to this inflation problem.
All right, let's talk about another issue that is the number one issue for certain voters. We're talking about the overturning of the abortion laws. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, so the recent Dobbs decision stood for the premise that is now a state's issue. It's no longer a federal issue. And as we know, Doug, we live in one of the bluest states in the nation with some of the most liberal abortion laws. And let me be clear, this is a state's issue. And if I was running for state office, I might state my position about my campaign, but I'll do it just for the record here. I do not oppose abortion when it comes to rape, incest, or life of the mother. I do not oppose abortion in the first trimester. I do oppose abortion in the second and third trimesters. I would insist on not using federal funds for abortion. And likewise, I would insist on parents being notified when their minor age children seek to get an abortion. My opponent, Doug, has no limits whatsoever. She thinks that one should be able to walk into a non-doctor on the 40th week of a pregnancy and to terminate that pregnancy. I think that's way, way, way too far. I think there is a middle ground in this issue. I do think there's extremism in this campaign on abortion, but it lies solely in my opponent's corner. And she's far out of touch with what most people think should be limits on abortion.
Would you support Lindsey Graham's proposal banning abortions nationwide after 15 weeks?
No, I wouldn't, because again, Doug, it's not a federal issue. This is for the states to decide through the people. The people should elect representatives. We're New Yorkers, Doug. The folks listening to us and will vote in this district are New Yorkers, and they should vote for state representatives who share their view on abortion. And again, in New York, we have some of the most extreme laws, and those ought to be looked at. And to play this blame game on the federal government right now, like my opponent is spending more than $1 million trying to make this a federal issue. She's a lawyer. She understands this is not a federal issue. She should start telling the truth on it, Doug.
Mr. LaLota, you were the Board of Elections Commissioner for the Republicans in Suffolk County for a while. Did you ever see fraud, mismanagement?
Absolutely. I worked across the aisle as the Republican Elections Commissioner by law in New York. Half of the staff are from the Democrat Party and half are from the Republican Party. And we work together every day. Sometimes we didn't always get along, but at the end of the day, we had to roll up our sleeves and work together to put forth a product that was good for Suffolk County's 1 million voters to ensure that we had a proper democratic small d process here in Suffolk County. Yes, I saw fraud. I actually reported it a number of times to our district attorney, things on absentee ballots that were an issue. Here in New York, we don't have a voter ID law. I think we should. I think New York State should be the 37th state to have a voter ID law, and that would decrease the fraud in our elections. It would increase a lot of the confidence in our elections. I think that's something that should be done with a bipartisan approach, Doug.
kind of a roundabout way to get to this question, but do you think the 2020 presidential election was fair and accurate?
Well, I think there was some unfairness, but in Suffolk County, I voted to certify the results here in Suffolk County. If I was a member of Congress, I would have voted to certify the election as well. But I do have some issues. I do have a lot of issues about the absentee ballots. And for 100 years here in New York State, absentee ballots were known to cause more fraud. That's why there had been limitations agreed upon by both parties here in New York State, such that absentee ballots really should only go to folks who are in the military, folks who are legitimately out of the county on vacation, individuals who had medical issues and they couldn't get out of their home. Both parties, Doug, for 100 years agreed that that should be a limitation from absentee balloting. And because there's no chain of custody, there's no way to ensure that there was continuity and chain of custody there. I do have concerns, but I think the federal courts were the right venue to adjudicate those issues.
All right, running up against the clock here, just real quick, if you can, some important issues. Gun laws, do you see the need for any change on a national level?
I think that voters should understand that 92% of gun crimes are committed by individuals who have unregistered or illegal firearms. We need to focus, and specifically as a state, on enforcing the laws that we have on the books. Here in this bluest state where we have the so-called most stringent gun laws, we should start enforcing the ones on the books right now.
Okay, Mr. LaLota, unfortunately, that's all the time we have. We want to give you the exact amount of time we gave your opponent, so unfortunately, we have to end it there. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Doug.